Thank you. Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Call the order, please.
Mr. Benton?
Here.
Mrs. Boer? Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Here. Mr. Swager?
Here. Do we have any announcements, visitors? None. Alrighty. With that being said, move into the treasurer's report.
You have several minutes of meetings. You've got the January 10th organizational meeting, the January 10th regular session meeting, the special session from January 18th, and the work session from January 24th. You have the December 21 treasurer's report, updated estimated resources and appropriations. To appoint myself as the public records designee for the Board of Education for calendar years 22 and 23. This is because we sat new board members' terms beginning January, so we have to do that every 2 years. And then we are required by the county to submit a resolution accepting the rates for the tax year 21 so that they can collect taxes on our behalf. And we have one monetary donation for the elementary school.
Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Comments? Questions?
Appreciate the donations for the elementary.
And you're more than happy to be the public records designee.
I thank you.
Yes.
We're happy for you.
Yes. Congratulations. With that being said, call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes. Motion carries. Mr. Dixon?
Yes, good evening. Just a few items to update the board. I think I covered most in the ed briefs that came to you in advance. But before I get into the general recommendations, first of all, I would happy to take any questions regarding cooperative strategies. I tried to address that with data as a potential study for looking at enrollment potential for our district, particularly given the growth that we're expecting. So I'd appreciate any input going forward on that. I am looking into a consortium because other districts in our area are looking to do that study. So I thought perhaps if we would go together and have a quote for the county, if they're digging into those issues anyway for one district, we might be able to find some economy in having that study done. But I'd like to know the board's wishes with regard to that type of a study. So welcome any input on that going forward. And I'll let you know what kind of pricing we get. I'll get that out to you and would appreciate guidance on that.
Do you want that input tonight, or do you want it sent to you? How do you want that?
Anytime. I can get the pricing first so you can make a informed decision, Ruth Ann. But if there's certain questions that you want me to research, I'd be happy to research them.
No, I just know what we experienced with the last consortium, or the last approach we used with the consultant to do our data collection.
Okay.
Remember?
Oh, you mean for the beginning of that? Oh, yeah. This is totally different.
I'd like to see their work, because that was
Sure.
that was a debacle.
Yeah, and
So-
it's been 2019 since I've shared samples of their work with
Yeah.
you. So we'll get more information out on that. But I do think it would help in the decision making going forward to have that data, because they do a deep dive.
I think
Okay.
that's also a good discussion for the liaison with the village and the township. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? To see if there's some
Absolutely.
shared interest or cost there as well.
Next, I think you've received a copy of the work, and I do appreciate the work of the committee. It's been about 2 years into making this scoreboard marketing project. So you have that full plan that's been placed before you, the program planning. What we will need is some discussion relative to how the board might want to disperse those funds as they are collected. I can break that down a little bit more for the board relative to what we expect in the first year, but we will have to have some discussions relative to how to use those revenues. They are starting, the boosters have a copy of that. They're working with it. Robbie's working with it. And the first goal is to fill the first 2 spots up on the board, first and foremost, then go down to the varsity level and pick up the rest. So we had to jump on that pretty quick because the new year's been upon us now for over a month. So if there's any questions on that going forward, I'd be happy to answer them. While I'm speaking about athletics, there's issues of program planning. Certainly, we have programs of athletics that are growing. There's various concerns. You know that Mr. Brickner has been working hard on data aggregation so that we can get a really, really good, clear picture of the operations of the athletic department as a whole. This started last year. Robbie has picked the ball up and has really done a yeoman's job through fall and winter. And now certainly he wants to experience the spring and gather that data as well. But relative to numbers of students coming out for sports, I thought I'd invite Robbie to come to the podium and just kind of give a brief update on where we're at with regard to the scoreboard marketing, the program planning, the data for the athletic department. And we also have another issue with the JYAA track program that's been requested. We've had a club basically doing some running that we gave a waiver to in the past. But Robbie's been asked by JYAA to consider allowing a youth league to come in and run on the track as well. And so I'd like him to give a brief update on those items and answer any questions you might have for us to research. Robbie, if you could make sure the microphone is on, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I got a couple different items here. First things first, what I just handed out to members of the board, has our athlete turnout rate for spring sports. So you'll see I went back as much as I could all the way back to the spring of 2016. There are a couple items I couldn't grab, but for the most part, I've got everything as far as number of paid coaches, number of volunteer coaches, athletes broken down by grade, 7 through 12, how many sports we might field for those, how many different teams we might field for a given sport, whether it's varsity and JV, 1 level or 2 level at the middle school, that type of thing. So it might be a little overwhelming because there's a lot of data points on there. But the main topics I wanted to go over and why I'm bringing this to light now, you'll notice is I just put the spring sports on there. This is something I'm hoping to get for fall and winter sports as well. It's a little time consuming. But a couple points I wanted to make for spring sports is that many of our spring sports are having tryouts in the coming weeks, and the official start date of those spring sports it varies, but they're all towards the end of February. And a couple items as far as our softball program, we are unsure right now whether we'll have 1 level or 2 at the high school, so 9 through 12. In recent years, you'll see it's actually gone back and forth between having a couple years ago just varsity only. The past 3 years, I want to say, it's been varsity and JV, but barely enough to field 2 teams. And so we're about to get answers on that probably in the next 2 weeks, as far as whether we'll be having enough to field a JV softball team or not. The second item with softball is on the flip side. Our numbers for signups for middle school softball are fantastic, especially at the 7th grade level. In recent years, we've only had 1 middle school softball team, where I think it's going to be, again, we'll have tryouts next week, but I think we will definitely have enough for 2 middle school softball teams, 1 8th grade team and 1 7th grade team. The preliminary numbers I got, I believe it was 11 8th graders and 17 7th graders have signed up for softball. Now, of course, these numbers are not accurate. You know, you can sign up online or sign up on Final Forms and not show up to tryouts. But I do know that because whether or not we're losing a JV softball squad, we would rather promote and add teams, add participation, especially if it's a sport where you've got 1 group and then you'll have to make a lot of cuts, or you could have 2 groups and now keep more kids interested and more into that sport. So with that, there's some things going along with how you fill coaching staff. But that was one point I wanted to make about middle school softball. And then the last point about numbers and participation, was if you look at baseball at our high school baseball program, we have been growing the past couple years. In recent years, we've had 2 high school teams for baseball, so 1 varsity, 1 JV. And you'll see in the past couple years, it's gone from 29 athletes, 33 athletes last year, and we have 41 signed up for high school baseball. Again, not set in stone numbers because we haven't had tryouts yet. But if we do get pretty close to that 40 number for baseball, we will want to probably look at adding either a freshman baseball or a JVB baseball. If it's JVB, then you can have some sophomores on the team as well. But again, some complexities go with that. You've got to find facilities to practice, have games, and all that fun stuff. So that's my update as far as spring sports and specifically the numbers. If anyone has any questions on that, maybe it would be a good time to pause here before I move on to one of the other topics.
Yeah, I know, Robbie, the board for several years has been very concerned about the growth and how we're tracking this data, what's an appropriate number to field in any of these sports. And so this is really good data going forward to help us make decisions relative to these different sports, because adding sports with limited facilities is difficult. And so I would guess that we were going to need a lot more detail with respect to how this would work out if we were to consider any additional programming beyond what we've had in the past. And that would go for fall, winter, and spring sports.
No more
Board.
real estate. I'm with you. I understand that. Well, you'd like to do all of it. Where are we going to have them play?
Yeah. So
Those
just
are your challenges.
no, yeah, I got you. I don't know if that's a rhetorical question, but when we're talking about having 1 or 2 middle school softball teams, that can kind of resolve itself because they can still practice together kind of as one group. Again, there's not like a bunch of other groups using our middle school softball field. And then typically what they would do is if one team would play at home on a given night, and at that same night, the 7th grade team would play away. So some of those are not as complicated, but maybe adding a 3rd baseball team would be a little bit more complicated with one field. We've made it work having 2 teams on one field, having a 3rd team. We'd have to get a little bit, myself, Coach Carpenter, have to get a little creative on practice schedules, game schedules. And
that's when Mr. Giannini's group comes in.
Absolutely. I believe they've repurposed the largest diamond on the Belt facility to be able to house high school length bases. So that's pretty cool. That's not something they need to do, but part of the give and take with the school district and the youth program as well.
Can freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors practice together at the baseball level, or is that?
Yeah. So 9th through 12th grade, you can practice together. Trying to run a practice with 30 kids at the same time versus 42 is a little bit different. But yeah.
They normally hold 2 practices now.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I just wondered if they could practice together with that.
Yep, they could.
So I wanted the board to have a sense of the work that's going on to try to plan and get data so that we can make good decisions. And Robbie will be anxious to see how this actually transpires into bodies on the team going forward, and look forward to, as he gets data to me, I'll pass it on to the board so we can monitor this going forward.
Are we looking to, if they do have the 41 numbers come out, are you looking to come back to us to possibly add that team to baseball?
You're talking about adding a 3rd team for baseball?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If we have the numbers, this is something that I think we were 3 to 6 athletes away from possibly doing last spring. Where let me put it this way, if it doesn't happen this year, it's going to happen next year, because I think you can kind of see a little bit of a trend as far as baseball kids coming out. And that's also why I broke it down by age group. So it's not just, okay, well, there's 41 kids this year. Where are they all at? And if you look at the last couple of years of the baseball group, you'll see that they maybe were a little bottom heavy, having more underclassmen than upperclassmen. And I think that's that if that number continues, that shows growth, in my opinion. So just looking at last year's seniors versus this year's projected upcoming 8th graders, that kind of explains I think it's 7 additional athletes. So I don't know, I guess the inner workings of that, if I come back in 2 weeks about saying, hey, tryouts went great, they would love to have third team. I don't know how into the week, I don't know how that works exactly, but this is
For
why I
us-
wanted to bring this
For
up
us, it's
now.
a discussion about transportation costs,
It's
coaching
transportation,
positions.
it's coaching position, it's all that. Absolutely. But I wanted you to be aware of the emerging issue.
And not to put, Mike on the spot, but our problem also causes more conflict. The more teams we have growing causes us less shareable space for JYAA, which then we're over there leaning on them for their space while they're trying to lean on us for our space. So that's definitely a conversation that's got to be looked into even more, because everyone's programs are growing and we're not adding any additional athletic space out there. So that'll be a challenge for both.
Appreciate the data, though. This is excellent, because we have not had this opportunity
Yep.
with such finite numbers. This is really good.
Absolutely. And it's
Yes,
something
thank you.
I would like in the, next couple weeks. So I'm not handing this to you in July or August about fall sports. In the next couple weeks, I'd like to hand you a packet with the up-to-date numbers for those other two for fall and winter sports.
And I will tell you, Ruth Ann, Robbie, for fall and winter has very good data relative to attendance, revenues. He's working with the boosters to try to maintain an understanding of the whole program like we've been after for years. I'm just impressed with what he's doing with the data, and I think you will be too once you see it. It really will help us plan and make good decisions based on that data. So thank you, Robbie, for that. Could you briefly kind of go into where we are on the implementation of the marketing plan? I know it's just in its infancy, but just a high level discussion in case the board has any questions.
Yep, absolutely. We've had multiple meetings over the past few months about this, and each time I've kind of gone back, adjusted numbers, talked to a couple other schools, ADs that might have implemented a plan like this with their scoreboard. So the way that it is broken down in very general terms is there's 4 pricing levels, 4 commitment levels, or tiers, if you will. And the higher the tier, there's fewer available, but obviously a bigger draw, more offerings and higher dollar tags associated with that. And where we've landed, and it's very much a we, because every time I take what's been given to me and make some adjustments, is that the top 2 tiers would be sold. The work would be done to find those partners by basically the school district, by myself, the superintendent.
This is the summary.
Okay, yep. The top 2 levels would be those conversations with local businesses would be had between myself, the principal, and superintendent. And then the 3rd and 4th levels, the primary pushers on as far as selling and finding those sponsorships would be the athletic boosters. And while each group has to discuss where that money will potentially go and how to the money that goes to school district, how are we going to divide that? The money that goes to the boosters, how are we going to divide that? But the top 2 levels, the funds from those, thank you. The funds from those would go to the district. The 3rd level would be a 50-50 split between money going to the district and money going to the athletic boosters. And then that 4th level, again, we can sell a lot of those. That 100% of that money would go to the athletic boosters. And you see on what Mr. Dixon just handed out that I've got kind of a price if we sell every item on there, every sponsorship, how much would possibly go to the district, how much would possibly go to the boosters, and that's on a yearly basis. Now, the commitment level, the top 3 levels would be multiple year commitments. So that top level includes 2 of our ad spots on the scoreboard. So we only sell 2 of them, but we've basically started that as a 5-year commitment because we don't want to be going up every 12 months and changing out what's on the top of our scoreboard. Whereas the 2nd and 3rd level would be 2-year commitments, and that bottom level would be a 1-year commitment. But there's a lot of offerings that go into this. It's not just putting an ad on the scoreboard. Just a couple things from the top level would be the two anchor spots at the top of the scoreboard, as also a 30-second commercial that could be filmed by our media group, and then as well as different graphics, animated graphics that would be played at every football game or every soccer game or any general sport event.
I didn't see.
All the way down to the bottom level is basically the thought of moving our banner ads from the fence onto the scoreboard, where we can have a slideshow that basically says, thanks to all of our awesome sponsors, and it's got a logo for each of the companies, and we just kind of run that on a loop. And what's great about that is I can load as many of those on there as possible. We could put 4 or 5 or 6 on each slide, 8 seconds a slide. I can just hit play and it can just run until somebody decides to hit a touchdown graphic or until somebody decides to hit a corner kick graphic, whatever the sport is. But I guess that's a general, but if there are specific questions, you can.
Sure. They all have copies of the full plan.
Yep.
I just felt a little highlight just to kind of give a little explanation on it because we have to move and shake on this to make it work. Any questions for Robbie?
The only thing that I would suggest is that, one of the things was going out 10-year period. I would suggest that you not go out quite so far, because in 10 years, we don't know what this is going to look like, right? So, which I think is great, okay?
Yeah.
But in 10 years, I'm not sure what we are going to be.
These could go up.
The value.
That's
and
correct.
The value goes up,
That's
and
correct.
that's why the committee went with 5 as
That's-
opposed to 10 years.
That's correct.
Precisely.
Okay.
Um,
I thought
On-
that's where Mr. Dixon was just talking about that. Do you hear me?
I'm sorry, I've got this.
I thought that's what Mr. Dixon was just talking about, that he said the board needs to look at and see how those amounts or increments would be divided up.
Yeah,
But it
if
looks
you
like-
look at
but
the
it looks
summary,
like here on the summary,
the summary I gave you, the boosters, the bottom 2 levels, that's what they sell. And they create a revenue that is equal or greater to what they had coming in before. Remember, we wanted to assure that we weren't going backwards with the boosters.
Right.
So that's the first 2 levels. The top 2 levels are sold through the athletic department to certain companies. Many left. There's 5 total. 5 total on
5
there.
total.
And then those revenues are what the board would need to determine how to divvy it out, Ruth Ann. Right. Right. We've talked about the need to make sure we have a scoreboard maintenance portion, equipment portion, turf replacement. So we're not having to go out for donations in 15 years to replace that. There's been some talk of some other group sharing. So that's what the board still needs to discuss. But right now we've got to be about getting the revenue in while we still discuss that. Yep. Mhm. Yep.
so I know that the signage, there's only 2 of those on the scoreboard itself that were,
2 of the, which would be considered the champion level, yes.
and then the legacy, we're saying that there would only be 3 available.
There would be
That's
three of those sold. Mhm.
And then the captain level, there's only 10 of those spots. But you
That-
said that's like a banner and you could throw those up pretty easily.
So that when I mentioned the banner, moving those on, that would be kind of considered our varsity level. But if you want, I can
Okay.
explain the reason for my quantity or the cap on those.
Sure.
The champion is pretty self-explanatory. We've got two spots in the top of our scoreboard. The Legacy, the next one down, we've got 3 spots available because I think possibly the highest attention getter for a company that might sign up for that would include an ad spot at the bottom of each one of our online tickets. So whether you print it off on PDF or the mobile version, they have 3 spots. Basically, it's not this big, but they have 3 spots on the mobile ticketing. So with that, whenever obviously these conversations happen with these companies, I'll share, our attendance figures to see that's something that could be not necessarily just a Johnstown company, but a local area company, because those ads get printed on all the away tickets as well. So maybe some sort of company that has multiple offices or services this area as a whole. The captain one, why I've made it 10, each one of those comes with basically a specific animated graphic to be played, whether it was, Johnny goal or Johnny corner kick or face off, something like that, welcome to Frank Chambers Stadium. So that maybe the further we get into it, we can see if there's more available, but there's only a finite number of graphics that we can load onto. Not that we can't load more onto the system, but we can't have a button for a 2-yard run. So there's only a certain number that could fluctuate. That could be 8 to 12. Anything more than that, I don't think we could promise a specific animated graphic on the scoreboard. And then on the varsity level, I put 36. That honestly, we can throw more slides up if we need to, but that might be a realistic number, I would say, to sell would be about 20 to 40 per year. So that's why I put that number there.
Thank you.
Yep.
And again, really appreciate your time and the committees. There's been quite a few people participate in this over a couple of years, kind of leading up to this. So thanks to everyone who contributed to the information. And Robbie, finally, could you just share briefly where we're at on the JYAA request for this kind of to combine the old club with the running club to use the track on a limited basis this spring?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike Giannini from JYA is here as well. So if anybody has any questions or if I say something wrong, you can jump up here. But basically, there's been a youth running club possibly the past couple years, or was last year the first year? Just last year. Okay, this youth running club basically used our stadium facility for maybe about 2 months, give or take, last year at the end of the spring, beginning of the summer. And it was something that, since it's specific to Johnstown youth athletes, that they, of course, got a fee reduction on the fee waiver for using our track and stadium facility. So basically that program has evolved into coming underneath the JYAA umbrella. So it's still some of the same coaches and main leader of that, which I believe that coach is a former track and field coach at Hamilton Township, but lives in the community here. Yeah. So basically the thought behind it is we've got a youth organization and youth opportunities for kids that want to start basketball before 7th grade, and it's kind of here in the community. But a lot of these varsity and middle school sports that we do sponsor at the middle school and high school level, we've got opportunities for the youth. We've got basketball, football, soccer, volleyball, wrestling. I might be leaving another one out, but last year didn't have a club. Kids that are interested in track. Sorry, this is going out. So this is basically the same program, give or take, of what it was last spring, but this is now just housed under the J banner. They would be looking to use the facility in May and June. I believe it's 9 weeks, about 4 hours per week on weeknights, and then a couple more hours on a Saturday or Sunday, as needed and as available. And obviously all of this is as available. This is me being able to fit it into the schedule or not. And I do think I can do that on where we're still in school. That might have to be for a time, 4 days a week. In June, there's a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they could go 2 hours at a time each evening, 2 days a week. And that's just for the weeknights. But this is all, of course, working around our high school and middle school track, as well as our high school, other high school, middle school groups that need to use that facility. This is not taking place or eating away at any time that our teams might otherwise need that facility.
Will they be holding actual meets or events, or is it just practice time? One.
They'd like to hold one meet, I believe, yes.
For that one, are you looking to utilize restroom, scoreboard? As you know, with the stadium, the issue gets into facility use and who's going to stock the bathroom, who's going to clean it up, who's going to be in the scoreboard. You know, we don't want anyone just running our scoreboard. We got some great equipment up there. Those are the issues I get focused on. I didn't hear how many kids? 220 kids for that one meet you're talking about. Okay. For the meet.
So we would probably need some, if they needed to use the press box, Tim, we would certainly have to have school personnel up there to run it. We've got a lot invested in that equipment and a lot of training for certain individuals. So that would have to be coordinated with the athletic department in some way to use any kind of press box equipment. My understanding is that for the most part, they wouldn't be using it at all, and that the restrooms would be cleaned the following mornings as they are now for all the events, because we have lacrosse and our track, and they're using it anyway.
Well, I was asking, with 220 kids and 440 parents or whatever are coming to those.
Oh, yeah.
That gets to be a fairly large crowd. That's why I was asking about.
It'd be a good opportunity for, one of the programs here to maybe run a concession.
My other question was, do you guys have an anticipated number of participants? Do you know how it's tracking? Like, how many folks you?
I have 32 right now.
32. Okay, and you got a couple more weeks for signups. Everybody listening online, if you want to run track, call JYA.
I'm already signed up and paid for my one.
Right.
You're running this year, Amanda?
No.
Okay.
So we've
My
got
child.
32.
Yeah, 61 last year.
61 last year. That's what I was just. It was a fairly large group. I just want to make sure when they're in the stadium, we have enough parental coaches, everybody in there for the number of kids we have. I don't want 32 kids with one adult in there. That's not going to work out real well.
There'll be multiple coaches.
Okay. And then are you capping it off at any point? Is there a maximum number you think you can take, or okay? All right. The meet is the only thing I think we're going to have to talk about. There'll be some costs involved to having staff, run some of those things. I'm assuming you'll be charging others to come to the meet or figuring out something. So we'll just that'll have the only.
Yeah. I've asked Robbie
discussion.
to prepare a proposal to address those issues. I went over exhaustively with him.
Okay.
All the different points, right, Robbie? So he's going to try to make this work and then present to us how it will work, right down to the practice schedules around our teams and how this event will work. So we'll get the detail. We'll get you a copy.
Okay. That's right. He was
And
saying
other
there'd be
liabilities,
multiple.
just
Yeah.
so we have our school issues covered.
You guys have your own insurance.
Yes.
They have their own insurance. And then Robbie, from our standpoint, we just want to make sure the coaches to athlete ratios are reasonable for what we have. I don't want anything out of whack as far as how many kids we have out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, again, would be run with a watchful eye with the youth group using our facilities. But just like they use the elementary gym often in the fall and winter for volleyball and basketball, there need to be a certain number of coaches there, and they need to respect all the facility and treat it nicely and leave it how they left it. And the times that they don't, or something isn't right, I'll hear about it, and we get that fixed. Yeah, exactly.
Great. So we would look to have a proposal, and then any requests for waivers like they had in the past, coupled with any potential cost coverage, like Mr. Swager was referring to, we could have that all in the proposal maybe for action at the March meeting.
Sure, absolutely. I
Great.
can get that with a potential, practice plan as well as when that event might be, all pending, I guess. And again, we would go over everything just like they do for volleyball, specifically volleyball and basketball using our facility.
Great.
So for the use of the press box, do you have to use the press box?
Only the one meet.
Only the meat.
That's what I understood. You'd only need access to that for the one meet, correct?
So they have to get somebody trained.
One meet.
Yeah.
Every up is at a different facility.
Right.
Probably have to
Okay.
be one of our school personnel that's been trained to be up there and run it. And that'll be a challenge for Robbie to kind of figure out.
Yeah. And our head
If
track
it's going to be
coach-
used, it has to be somebody that's trained because it's
Our head track coach is vice president of Hamilton Township. So
I'm
Great.
familiar with Matt.
just want to make sure the board was aware of all these issues. And I just to keep you up to date, it's more than I could cover. I'd write you a 5-page report, but I think it's better to have Robbie talk to you directly. So Robbie, thank you very much for coming here and spending a little time with us. Just a few other things, bring the board up to date relative to the fact that we are still looking to fill a maintenance position. I'd like everyone to know that we're still looking for a maintenance person on our staff. If you know somebody interested, please have them reach out to David Jenny. David is currently still accepting applications and interviewing for that open position. Want to also apprise the board of the fact that we are working on RFPs for the 2022-23 custodial services contract. We went into a 1-year contract with Harvard. They've done a pretty decent job with keeping up in these tough times. But at the same time, once we get those RFPs out and back, we'll be calling the Buildings and Grounds Committee together to review what comes in and to discuss which ones we're going to select, which one we'll select for next year. So I don't have a particular date for that yet, but Dave is working on any adjustments to the RFPs currently. As you know, we've moved forward to 3 policies that are still pending to the March meeting. I understand there needs to be some more discussion with the committee on those 3. And finally, happy to report tonight that we'll be resuming meetings with the City of Johnstown and the school district liaison meetings here soon. In fact, this coming Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we'll have our first meetings where we can openly dialogue on issues affecting the city and schools together. So we look forward to having that. They were waylaid because of COVID initially, and it's just nice to be able to get back together and talk. Also, another meeting's in the works for March 10th. Tim, I think you're planning on being at that relative to the 4th of July celebration, the events committee for the city. So, Tim, I appreciate your time working with that. I'm ready for my general recommendations, except for the fact that I do want to introduce one person that's with us this evening, Christina Shoemaker. Would you stand up, Christina? I want to welcome Christina. She's on the agenda for a little bit later to be approved as parapro for our elementary. Christina, if you just say just a couple words about yourself, and I know you've been subbing and working already. Thank you, Christina. Press the button there.
There we go. I have been a past resident of Johnstown, going through the school system from kindergarten on up to graduating in '87. I did move away to Colorado for a number of years, and we moved back to the area. My kids were in Westerville schools, and about 10 years ago, we moved back out to Johnstown because my kids had graduated, didn't need to live in a neighborhood anymore, wanted the country setting back again. So I have 2 grown kids. I have 2 grandkids that are 6 months apart, so they're like sisters. They love each other like sisters. They argue like sisters. I've been enjoying my time as, being the substitute, and then I just wanted to continue on in a more permanent role.
Well, we're happy to have you and happy to introduce you tonight. Board, if you have any questions or comments at this time.
Welcome. Officially.
Yeah.
Second that.
We always like to put a face with who they're acting on. So
Right.
thanks for
Right.
taking the time to be
Thank
here this
you.
evening.
Appreciate it.
Christina.
Thank you.
Next, I'll move on to the general recommendations, if you will. Under item A.
Can you separate A out for us, please?
Oh, yes, we will. We'll talk about A and vote on A first. How's that?
Yes, please.
We're asking the board to approve a request of a reduction of fees for facility use for this school year. This is kind of after the fact because it came to us late. This is for the Knights of Columbus free throw competition that they held this year, but we need to make a matter of record to have this approved. It's been approved for each year in the past. It's a regular event for our school district, and it's being separated out, I understand, because we have Mr. Benton, who's a member of the Knights and needs to vote separately. So, Mr. Swager, I'll let you take action on the motion.
Can I have a motion for A?
I'll motion.
Can I get a second?
A second.
Discussion?
Could you explain that? Is that a competition in which the school takes a portion of, or what? How does this work? I don't know.
So the Knights of Columbus has a
remember-
competition for age group each year. You shoot free throws, and the winner advances onto a regional and onto the state. There's no monetary winnings unless you win and move up. The individual winner can get something, but the school and the Knights of Columbus don't. They do it as an event just to promote their organization.
That's been going on how many years, Alan? Quite a few years. Goes way back.
Yeah. Many years.
I can say I participated in it when I was in middle school, so
So, yeah.
I can say it's 40 plus years.
It's been a while.
I'll go with the plus.
There you go. Treat yourself.
I just said plus.
Did you ever make a free throw?
I did compete. I won't say if I won or not.
Okay.
We call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton,
Abstain.
Mrs. Brewer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager.
Yes. Motion carries.
Then under item B, asking to approve the high school, middle school course offerings for 2022-23, which we gave a copy to you. I understand the middle school copy was out late to you. It was supposed to go out Friday. I apologize for that. You should have received that today. Under item C, asking the board to approve the purchase of the video surveillance equipment and access controls for the Johnstown Intermediate School. This was to be kept separate from the GMP by design and acted on once the quotes were received. And this cost is being proposed to you at a cost not to exceed $90,000. This will be for the Varkata cameras.
Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Second, please.
I'll second it.
Discussion.
I would just like to express some concern that we've not seen the course offerings in a setting where we can actually discuss them. So I'm not sure how ready everybody is to vote on them. I couldn't see anything but a couple areas that I'd like to discuss because we've talked about, is that our most valuable way of presenting education in that particular setting, or is it another type of course? I know some things have been mandated from the state. So how do those fit into the course offerings? Who's going to teach them, et cetera? So I think there's some discussion here that has not taken place, but if everybody's okay about it, I'll.
Well, I had a question on the middle school. I think, we got that earlier today, and I have not read through it. So is it in that document? Is there highlighted any changes from the previous year? Or are there any changes
They
at all?
simply added the media that was in there. They added the media that wasn't in the prior years.
Is that the design and at the last page, page 11?
The course? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And once again, and I explained this a little more in briefs. Two things happen. Seems like this happens ongoing because of changes in staffing, and we always get to this position where we need to schedule for next year, and it's that time already to start scheduling students for next year. Therefore, the course offerings need approved. And I won't go into great detail with you because I did so in ed briefs relative to attempts to have meeting, because there are some issues to be resolved relative to some of the curriculum, some of the materials decision making, some of the textbook inventory and controls, and more than happy to have those conversations. And I understand from individual conversations that it is the wishes of the board to make sure that in the future we have these curriculum meetings, curriculum committee meetings prior to November of each year, so that we can take a little closer look at these course offerings and explain the changes that are taking place from the state. More than happy to put that on, that happens going forward. So point well taken, Ruth Ann. I appreciate it.
I had questions on I know there's a financial management course that's supposed to be, is that what's listed in here this time?
Yeah. Could I ask Derek, would you mind taking the microphone for a moment? Because
And this
there
is in
is-
the high school.
yeah, this is high school. That's not that finances won't be covered still in the middle school some within the curriculum as it is now, and lead to what's going to be offered in the high school. But you are correct, Dan. Legislation has passed to require the coursework that is in the course offering manual now. But I want Derek to explain the timing of when we're going to be offering that and why. I think that's a very important question.
Sure. So this is a subject near and dear to my heart because this is what I taught. I was an economics major. I taught personal finance before it was a required standalone course. We had it where I was before as a standalone course. So the legislation impacts the current eighth grade class. So the current eighth graders at some point in their 4 years of high school will have to have 1 half credit. So basically a semester class dedicated to personal finance. Now, there's, as you can imagine, when it's 3-4 years out from a lot of implementation, there's a lot to be kind of determined here. We had hoped to offer it junior year. That's a year where we have room to add something like that. Our immediate concern was whether or not CTEC would offer it. So our students going to CTEC, and we just had an email. I don't even think I forwarded it to Mr. Dixon. It was had to be late last week from CTEC saying they would offer it. So most schools are going to implement it junior or senior year. So when we send our students to CTEC, they'll be able to get it there. Personal finance, financial literacy has been a requirement, but it's always been allowed to be embedded in another class. So we can fold it into our government class, which is required for all seniors, and they all get it. So now that it's a standalone course, yes, you see the financial management. That is in the classes that Rhonda Bellard teaches. And so they already kind of have that curriculum. They have a template. So we left that in there to serve that. There's still, we're still waiting on some standards and the things that definitely need to be taught. What we do know right now, I believe, is that social studies and math teachers will be able to teach it, but they need some sort of endorsement. And that's what CTEC's waiting on. We're waiting on. So teachers will have to kind of, I'm guessing it'll be a 1 or 2 day seminar, maybe an online class they have to go through in order to be able to teach that. But I might be interested in teaching a section. So if you're
in
open to
looking
that.
at what we're currently teaching in high school, in that you have already taught it, is it meeting what you taught before? Should we be enriching it this year? And what does that curriculum look like? I've not seen it. I don't know if anybody else has. But
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't quite get it.
Is the curriculum, are you happy with what is being taught in that curriculum? We can say curriculum, that's one word. What's taught under there? What does it look like? You've been an econ teacher. Do you think it covers what we should be until we get those state guidelines? We all know that.
Yeah, it is. It's adequate, but it's embedded in another course. So I think as a standalone course, one of the things the state tried to do was not add, an unfunded mandate. So what they did is they reduced the number of elective credits by half a unit, and basically dictated that one of the elective credits has to be this. So I am excited about the potential when you have an entire semester. Rhonda Bellard has taught this class before, the financial management, but to 15 students. Now all of our students will get it. And I think it's very, very important. Real life skills, kind of what you've always said about speech, those real life things we want our kids to have when they leave here. A solid financial kind of foundation, I think, is really important.
Including investing.
Yep.
I think was part of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
I know
saving,
Tim, you and I
budgeting,
had some
investing,
conversations
credit
relative
cards,
to that.
retirement accounts, student loans,
Making change.
auto loans. Making change. I do think we have some opportunities when we talk about curriculum. I taught the Dave Ramsey personal finance course for high school students. I really enjoyed that.
Did you
but-
do investments?
Oh
with
yeah,
them?
I love 401ks, Roth IRAs, 403bs, 527s. Love all that stuff.
Keep bidding.
ETFs, mutual funds. Yes. That every once in a while I'll run into a student who's got an interest there, and that's I love
Could
that.
you add
So,
Bitcoins to that too?
I don't understand Bitcoins. Still don't.
So
I'm trying
crypto's
to.
not on there.
Although after the
cryptocurrency.
Super Bowl, I got $15 in them when I did the Coinbase thing. So
Right.
I do appreciate you taking the time, Derek, to answer that question, and I think we can kind of rest assured that it's in good hands with your review and implementation of the new standards, but probably about 2 years away because it will be taught to juniors.
The 2024-25 school year will
Yeah.
be the first year.
So
to
the
implement it.
requirement would be, yes, for these current eighth graders. So next year they're ninth grade. The following year they're sophomores. The following year would be the first year of required implementation. I don't know if maybe that's what Mrs. Boer was getting at, of would we want to implement that early? And maybe is that what you were saying?
That's
Right.
fantastic.
That makes
Yes.
sense. So
Could we
um,
make it stronger, more teeth in what
Yeah.
we're currently teaching? If it's that valuable, which I believe it to be,
Mhm.
can't we up the ante right now? Can't we look at that curriculum while we're just designing our curriculum?
we could
Put a little more
definitely
teeth in it.
explore that and maybe not make it a requirement in case you have a handful of students who don't get it or they go to CTEC and they don't get it there yet. But I do think that's something we could definitely look at seriously considering for an early implementation.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Derek. And thank you, board.
Yes, I also have a question. We talked about with the media arts that we would come back together and talk about what classes they needed, if they needed to add classes or speech. That was one of the things we talked about heavily in those earlier discussions. I don't see speech in here, and I don't see any new classes for high school in regards to the new media. Well, I mean, this has been the first year, but still new.
And
Right.
speech and where we going to add that.
So
we better.
Are we adding that this year or not?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be fine.
I'm sorry, I
Sure.
have a couple questions.
No, that's fine. That's why we're addressing this.
I mean, I'd like to offer it to him in the schedule. I know that's
Yeah.
one of the things.
So we actually, and I think I forget the numbers, but I passed that on of how many students we have taking college level speech. So we have quite a few students who take Comp 1, Comp 2, and then move right on into speech, which is really nice. They're getting a college level speech class. We also met extensively with the English teachers, and speech is a component embedded, particularly at 2 grade levels, where they're getting a pretty strong public speaking, a unit. Let's say it's not a full year, it's not a full semester, but a unit where they have to give speeches. So we kind of looked at that. We do not have a standalone speech other than the comp speech. We could certainly do that, but another area where we are really working next year to implement that is in our career search, which is a required course for graduation. So we're really trying to kind of revamp that career search and make it a little bit more relevant and embed that speech component that we know is, or at least I've heard time and time again, is very important for the board, which I completely understand. So I think those areas are where we're trying to address that. If we're looking for a standalone speech elective, we could do that. Sometimes it's hard to get students to sign up for that, particularly when you have quite a few doing the CCP. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it was quite a few. So
I think in some of the discussions, it was who would teach at and what would be taking away from
that's
the
the
master schedule.
conversation with every class
Yeah.
that you kind of add in. But
And then just as a follow-up, for the media arts for the high school, I mean, I guess we were looking to see if we needed to add any classes or if there was something that we could enhance that with. And
are
did
you
we have
talking
any-
about the classes Mr. Beers teaches?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
journalism, or I know we have media art, advanced image making. There's another one. It's film production.
Mhm.
Film production. So we have those 3 classes, but I mean, is there anything else that we should be looking at? We're just trying to make a.
We can. We only have him for half a day, and then he's up at the middle school. So kind of our thought was to build a solid foundation for these first 2 years. This year is his first year.
Right.
So one of the things with a first year teacher is, he just kind of gets an understanding of what he's teaching as a first year teacher. To change all of his classes the next year is just kind of, leaves him in a constant state of change and turnover, where we know that there were students who would have been interested in his classes, but for scheduling reasons couldn't get in there. So we think we have enough students for those classes. But I mean, that's it's forward thinking.
So probably next year. So we'll have
Yeah.
it 2 years. Next year, we would anticipate seeing
Maybe
some
one new
feedback
class
on that.
where, you still have freshmen who are coming in who could do the film production, and they take another class their sophomore year. But yeah, probably year 3, you would look to add another class in the mix. And we do that with lots of electives where they kind of become not so popular anymore. You try to introduce something that's a little more interesting and engaging.
And I think it would be smart to sort of wait it out and see as 2, 3, 4 years go. Are we, as far as our media arts classes go, are they staying strong? Are numbers dropping? Are they doubling? And then as we look now, we will next year only have students who've been in it for 2 years. So year 4, 5, as those freshmen have come up and they've been doing it for multiple years, we might see the need for more advanced things like journalism. But I think it would be prudent to sort of see, the next couple years.
But we have middle
Where
school
our kids
taking
are-
these courses today. So
Yep.
in freshman year, we will have already had a year to 2 years.
The really good news is that you have the same person teaching both. So he knows what's gone on at the middle school, and then he gets them and can kind of tailor that class. I mean, the structure is there, but how far he takes it or what he does with it is largely dependent on the students and their experiences in that class.
So he can adapt that.
Yeah, he can. There's a lot of room, particularly in these electives, for adaptation like that. So if they have a really strong foundation, he doesn't have to start at step 0 like he did this year at the high school. So yeah.
I just
But-
wanted to make sure we were supporting.
Yeah,
this.
absolutely. We've been really pleased. Heard lots of positive feedback about his classes, and I know like the engagement for the running the scoreboard and those sorts of things has been pretty strong. And I know we're really excited. Mr. Brickner was able to schedule, I think, is that a go with CW for the football game? So we're going to have, we've had our football games broadcast on TV on the CW network. So Mr. Beers is going to work with our students to try to get some real life experiences with, live broadcasts, which I think is really nice. So, okay. Any other questions?
We'll wait till you sit down.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board on those 2 items? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson. Yes, Mr. Swager.
Yes. I would like to make sure, Dale, that gets noted for the November timeframe for these next years for the next superintendent.
It will. It already is. Believe me.
I appreciate it. Thank you. At this time, if I can get a motion to move into executive session for the consideration of appointment of employment and consideration of the purchase of property for public purposes.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
At what time we got 7:33.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Yes. Mr. Swanger?
Yes. Thank you. We will have action after. Mic's on for everyone, please. I'm going to declare us out of executive session at 9:02. Mr. Dixon.
Yes, we will move forward with superintendent's personnel recommendations. Under item 10A, we have a recommendation to approve the following unpaid leaves for Robert Fresh as listed. Under item B, we have to approve unpaid leave for Shauna Kaufman as listed. We have under item C to accept the resignation of John Dillon as head girls basketball coach. Under item D is to accept the resignation of Sharon Slater as JV volleyball coach. And then under item E, we're asking the board to please employ Christina Shoemaker, whom you met earlier this evening, as elementary paraprofessional. Under item F, asking the board to approve Tanya Bauman and Dan Whitmer as listed as track coaches for this year. Under item G, we're asking the board to approve the following volunteers: Levi Jacob for lacrosse and Greg Wenzel for middle school softball. Under item H, asking the board to approve stipends of $100 a day for 9 teachers to provide services for summer kindergarten screening scheduled for August 1st and August 2nd. This is as we have done each year in the past. Maximum cost of $1,800. Under item I, we're asking the board to authorize the employment of the following additional positions to support the board's decision to move to grades 4 or 5 in the newly renovated Johnstown Intermediate School for 2022-23 school year, and to maintain improved current instructional services to students. 1 innovation art teacher for the intermediate school, 1 music teacher for the intermediate school, who also serve a class at the middle school, 1 physical education teacher for the intermediate school, 1 reading math specialist for the intermediate school, 1 library paraprofessional. This job will not be a new hire, but will be a transfer from an existing employee. Reading math paraprofessional for the intermediate school. 1 dean of students. This will be for the elementary school. 1 secretary for the intermediate school. 1 art teacher for the elementary school. That'll be a pickup of the 6-day rotation on specials for all students to maintain that schedule. And the intermediate school principal, which will be filled by transfer within the district. Under item J, asking you to approve the job description for elementary dean of students. Under item K, to accept the resignation of myself for the purpose of retirement effective August 5th. These are my personnel recommendations for the board this evening.
Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Discussion. Where do we want to start? I think all the folks that we're bringing on board and the volunteers and the coaches, obviously, we thank all of them for that hard work and dedication. I am more than thrilled to see that we have the track coaches on this agenda. So I appreciate that, Robbie. I know you had to work hard on that one. Appreciate it. Going through the positions, we've had exhaustive conversation on these positions over the last couple of months. I think if anyone has any questions, certainly speak up.
Just want to thank Marcy and Janet for all of the work, research, scheduling you guys provided us to make our decisions.
Graphs and charts are very helpful for me. Thank you. The job description, which we did have one more thing, I think Deb's going to add to that, but other than that, we're good with that as far as I know. And then, of course, accepting Mr. Dixon's resignation. He's assured me it's not an option otherwise. But we do appreciate Dale, everything he's worked for here. You know, he's been here most of my time on the board. We've accomplished a lot of great things. I do appreciate everything you've done, Dale. It's been great working with you. I know we'll be here at least till August, but then you're also going to still remain a member of the community. So I do appreciate that as well.
That's our plans.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Offer to help in any way I can in the future.
Appreciate that. Thanks. With that, anyone have any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes. Motion's carried. Any committee reports? I think we're pretty well caught up on those. New business. We do have to, and we've discussed this at the prior board meetings, but we've worked it out with the treasurer. I'd like to make a motion to approve a payment to CBS in the amount of $2,850 for the appreciation stipends to be paid to the 19 bus drivers. It's a maximum of $150 per driver/supervisor for service above and beyond the call of duty during the pandemic. This is what we talked about before, essentially giving the bus drivers the same stipend that we gave some of our other employees last year. As we know, we are one of the very few school districts that did not experience and have not experienced the transportation issues and closed school and delays that everyone else has, because we've had drivers dedicated to this. So we did want to show a small token of appreciation to those drivers.
It is Bus Driver Appreciation Month. So.
And it is Bus Driver Appreciation Month. So when your bus driver comes to get your kid, make sure you thank them.
I had to chase him down.
If I can get a motion for that,
So moved.
can we get a second? We have a motion by Ms. Boer, second by Ms. Thomas. And comment? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes, motion carries. And then the last thing I did want to talk about is we've discussed about changing the starting time of these meetings. We've discussed earlier meetings for various reasons. Our staff, our administrators have to often wait here until the meeting starts at 6:30. And then, of course, it is, 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30 when we get home. So I was in discussion looking to move these meetings up a little earlier. Now that we live stream them, it's not as burdensome for people to get to the meeting. They can watch it remotely, have access. So I was asking for a motion, or making a motion to start future board meetings, at least for the remainder of this school year, at 5 p.m. instead of 6:30, to see that also help free up like Robbie and those that have to go to track meets, basketball games, things of that nature on those nights, so they're not running out of here. So this would be an accommodation for pretty much all the school staff, myself included, in those. So we're looking to move those up and try that out, see how it works. If it works well, I talked to Mr. Dixon about this. When we do have like parental presentations, we could always move those to the back of the meeting. That way, parents could come in still later in the meeting and still participate and not have to take time off of work. We understand, a lot of people don't get off work till 4:30 or 5. So we're not trying to make it too burdensome, but also be realistic with the time of our staff and, working 12, 14, 16-hour days. So we're hopeful that this at least gives them a little bit of relief. So with that all being said, if I can get a motion to change the starting time of our board meetings from 6:30 p.m. and begin working them at 5 p.m.
I will make the motion.
Can we get a second?
I'll second. Go ahead.
I'll second.
And any discussion?
Could we have Debbie Lowe send that first meeting to us at 5 o'clock?
Yeah,
A reminder.
a reminder to show up at 5. I appreciate
Otherwise, we'll
it.
be here at 6. And
Will this be effective for the March meeting, or are we?
I was going to say, what about the February?
Do we want to make it the very first meeting of March, our normal board meeting in March, or do we want? When's our next board meeting? Feb 28th.
You have a work session.
28th, if you want to do the work session.
I'm fine with starting at the work session.
Okay, 28th.
28th, effective March or February 28th, 5 p.m.
What?
February 28th.
Okay.
We will put out a new list of all meetings.
Okay.
And get that out to the media as well, and get you a copy of the actual meetings, all showing
Yep.
at 5 o'clock.
Appreciate that. Can we call the roll, please?
Yes, please. Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Swager.
Yes, motion carries. With that, any other information? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
Can we get a second?
Second.
Adjourn the meeting at, what do we got,
9:12.
9:12 p.m. Can we call the roll, please?
Mr. Benton.
Yes.
Mrs. Boer.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Swager.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good evening.